What's up, I'm Troubleshoot. Welcome back to another optimization guide. My most popular video is a Windows 10 and 11 optimization, and this is a direct sequel to them updated for 2024. And as I got myself a brand new laptop that I need to set up from scratch, I'll be running through everything anyways, so we'll be squeezing every last drop of performance out of this laptop. And of course, if you're going to be following along, you don't need a laptop. You can do the exact same steps on a PC, and on top of this, you don't even need a fresh install, as everything that I'll be showing you here can be done on an existing Windows installation. Let's begin. Alright, so I've got my laptop set up behind me over here, and we'll be remotely connecting to it just so it makes noise over there and not in front of my mic. Looking over at my PC, I've got a brand new installation of Windows, and we'll be running through a few things. If you've just installed Windows, or you just bought a laptop or PC, there may be some things installed by default. On my system, I clean installed Windows, and I installed all of the default drivers that came with my motherboard, including the chipset drivers, etc. Sometimes you'll find software like this, for example, the control center, that allows me to control my laptop's LEDs, keyboard RGB, and a couple of extra things. If your PC has something like this, don't worry about it being bloatware. A lot of the time, this can actually help you. This software, in particular, on this particular laptop, allows me to control the battery to improve the battery health and longevity by setting something like a stationary mode, where it'll charge the battery and discharge it in such a way that it'll keep it healthier for longer if I'm using it stationary, such as behind me, plugged into the wall. On top of this, software like this may have optimized power profiles and things like that for your system, such as here, that I definitely recommend using above any other profile, as they oftentimes are tuned for your particular device. In my case, I was able to choose turbo mode, and just like that, my power plan should be optimized and we should have a really good performance. Not to mention, sometimes you can control liquid cooling, or even just fan curves, etc. from a simple app like this. Having less software installed, even if it's not the best, is usually a good thing. I, for one, won't be uninstalling the software, as I haven't got a good replacement for it, but the only thing I would recommend removing that comes pre-installed with the system may be some kind of outdated antivirus or extra bloatware, etc. Usually, if you get a new device and it's filled with random things, just do a clean installation with a fresh Microsoft ISO from the Microsoft website for Windows 10 or 11. To be absolutely clear, I would not recommend downloading a custom, especially a gaming Windows ISO file, as these have been modified by other people, and you of course can't go and see exactly what's been changed. Not to mention, you'll be risking your safety throughout the entire use of that device and that specific operating system install, such as your online credentials, passwords, etc., just for the fact that you may gain 1 to 2% FPS. It's not worth it, and with a default installation of Windows, you can still deep-load it and hyper-optimize it to get the best possible performance. That's what we'll be doing here. With that out of the way, I've basically just installed a web browser and a screenshot application. Besides that, not much else. On a fresh installation of Windows or on an existing system, we can still optimize it in the exact same way, following most of the same steps. Just make sure to check the timestamps down below if you need to skip forward or you already know how to do something. First of all, let's start at the very beginning and update our system. Hit start, type in update, and open check for updates. This should open up settings followed by Windows Update. Click the green check for updates button, wait for it to finish, and if any updates have been found, download them, install them, and restart your system. I've already done this and nothing came up, so let's continue. Next up, downloading graphics drivers. A lot of the time, your system may come with graphics drivers pre-installed, or Windows Update will more than likely download an older version of your graphics driver. Even if you already see an Nvidia, AMD, or something like that app on your system, I'd highly recommend downloading and installing a fresh GPU driver from your GPU manufacturer's website. To find out what kind of graphics card you have, you can hit start, type in DXDIAG, and hit enter to open up DirectX Diagnostics. You can click yes or no. I'll choose yes here, that's fine, and we'll wait for it to look at our system. If we check the Display 1 tab, you should see one of the graphics cards in your system. If you're seeing the same brand as your CPU, in my case Intel, then this likely means that this is an integrated graphics card and something that's built into your CPU. This is one of the lower powered graphics cards on your system, especially if you bought it with a powerful Nvidia, AMD, or something like that. Checking the other display tabs will usually show what kind of other graphics cards you have installed. As you can see, I have an Nvidia GeForce RTX 4080 laptop GPU, and this is what I'll be downloading the drivers for. This is my high-performance GPU. So let's go ahead and do it. We'll close this and open up a web browser. As I've installed a different web browser to Edge, I can unpin my existing one and pin this here in its place. We'll open up Google and search download followed by your manufacturer driver. I'll be clicking the first non-sponsored link, nvidia.com/downloads, and as you can see, it's giving me a list of different options that we can choose. Just follow along as closely as possible. On all of the different websites, you'll be selecting your product series, the product group, such as in my case, a 40 series, and as it's a laptop, I'll be choosing notebooks. Then my product is a 4080 laptop GPU. Fantastic. Operating system is Windows 11. We'll leave it as Game Ready driver, but you can choose Studio driver if you need more consistent performance for things like 3D modeling and businessy stuff, and then just click Search after making sure the language is correct. I'll click Download. Download, we'll save it and open it when it's done downloading. We can open it, click OK, and it should start installing our graphics driver. There is a quick note: if you would like, you can do a clean install of your graphics driver to make sure that there's no bloatware or anything left over, broken packages, broken settings, etc. from the default installation on your device, or of course an older version left over by Windows Update. If you'd like to do a clean graphics installation, close your installer or don't run it in the first place and search for Download DDU. On this Guru 3D website, we'll be downloading Display Driver Uninstaller. Scroll down, choose EU or USA, wait for the download, save it, and open it. This is a zip file containing DDU. Drag this out to your desktop and open it. Now, inside of this zip file is yet another zip. We'll click Extract, and now we have a new folder on our desktop. Deleting the installer. With this folder now on our desktop, it's successfully installed. As soon as we delete this folder, it'll be uninstalled. Before we open this folder and run Display Driver Uninstaller, download the latest version of your graphics driver and place it next to it on your desktop. So, in my downloads, I have this Nvidia installer. I'll place it on my desktop, and now we can go ahead and do the DDU process. Essentially, you'll be hitting Start, typing in Config, and opening System Configuration. Inside of here, head across to the Boot tab and tick Safe Boot over here. Make sure that you have Minimal selected, click Apply, and OK. Then you'll need to restart your PC. Don't worry, it will look different. The background will be missing, but it's only temporary. Safe mode means that none of the drivers are loaded. It's specifically a recovery system that allows you to do low-level things like completely uninstalling and reinstalling your graphics driver. We'll click OK, and we can choose Restart. At this point, your system will reboot, and it'll look different when you open it up. I'm not going to do that here as I can't record it, but imagine that I'm now in safe mode. Open the folder here, open Display Driver Uninstaller, and choose Yes. Then inside of the software, you'll get a pop-up, click OK, and then a big window like this. You can leave everything as is. The only thing I'd recommend turning on is at the very end over here, prevent downloads of drivers from Windows Update. I'd recommend ticking this as Windows isn't going to download an older version of your driver and try to install it while we're trying to install the brand new one that we just downloaded. You can alternatively turn off your Wi-Fi and disconnect your Ethernet in order to make sure that you're not going to automatically download the latest driver. It's easier to just tick this and close the window, so that's what I'll do. Then select your device type, select GPU, and it should automatically pick out the correct GPU that we want to clean reinstall. If not, choose it from the drop-down just below. Mine is an Nvidia, so we'll choose that, and because we're now in safe mode, at this point, we could click Clean and Restart. It'll uninstall your graphics driver, and it'll reboot us. However, we'll still be in safe mode. I'd recommend hitting Start, typing in Config, and opening System Configuration once more. Head back to the Boot tab and uncheck Safe Boot. Apply and OK. Then exit without restart, and we can continue the process here. When you click Clean and Restart, your PC will shut down and boot up normally. Now you'll be back inside of normal Windows with no graphics driver. All you need to do now is open the latest driver that we just downloaded earlier and move to your desktop. So I'll open this here, click Yes, and run through the installer as we would usually. So here we go. I'd recommend installing just the Nvidia driver, as Nvidia has a new Nvidia app that replaces GeForce Experience, but if you still want GeForce Experience, you can choose to install it here and continue. I'll just install the driver, agree and continue, and we'll leave it as Express. However, you can customize it if you see fit. There is a way of customizing the installer before this point and removing some bloat from it, but for the most part, you're not going to gain all that much extra performance by doing so. That is an option, and if you'd like to know how to do it, you'll find a link in the description down below. But for now, leaving it as Express is more than good enough, or Custom, and Disabling something like Nvidia HD Audio if you're not going to use audio from your display is a good idea. In my case, I'm uninstalling GeForce Experience anyway, which is a net good. So I'll leave it as next and we can continue. At this point, your screen may flicker, just wait for it to finish. And there we go, we've now installed our graphics driver. We can delete DDU and our graphics driver installer as such and save some space. At this point, if you installed GeForce Experience or AMD or Intel's equivalent, you can update your graphics card driver from that in the future. As I skipped GeForce Experience, I'll instead be installing the Nvidia app. Searching for Download Nvidia app, I get the beta over here. We'll be downloading it and saving it. The Nvidia app beta still includes shadow play and all that good stuff if you're looking for it. It's just the future and soon to replace GeForce Experience. So we'll open the installer and run through it as usual, agree and continue, and we'll leave it as game ready driver. Next, we can turn on automatic optimization. I usually turn this off as it messes with game settings. Next, the Nvidia overlay. If you'd like to use shadow play and things like that, leave this on. Personally, I'll be turning this off for now. And we'll click Done. In the Nvidia app or GeForce Experience, you can head across to the Drivers tab in the future and it'll tell you when there's a GPU driver update that you can then download and install through this app itself, simplifying your process. Also on top of this, from the Graphics tab, you can sometimes adjust settings for different games and things like that on your system, so we can customize them here instead of doing it in-game, choosing pre-optimized profiles, which are usually pretty good. On the Global Settings tab over here, we get a couple of different options. RTX Digital Vibrance is something you can turn on with an RTX 40 series graphics card, which helps improve vibrance in games. If you want such a thing, you can turn it on here. Battery boost is a good idea if you're on a laptop, of course, and this will better optimize your battery while running at lower frame rates and things like that. CUDA GPUs is fine to leave as is. Image sharpening will leave as off. Low latency is a good idea to turn on, or turn on to ultra mode if you're running a low-powered CPU and a high-powered GPU. And of course, we can usually control this on a game-to-game basis in the in-game options. For now, I'll be leaving this as off, as I'll usually control this in in-game options anyways. Max frame rate should be set to off, just so that games are uncapped by default, but if you'd like to cap frame rates for everything, you can do so here. And as you probably already recognized, most of these settings here are the same as in the Nvidia control panel, which is a good observation, and of course there's only a handful here. This Nvidia app is supposed to also replace the Nvidia control panel, but it's not quite there yet. Everything else here we can pretty much ignore. Power management will leave as normal, but you can choose prefer maximum performance if you're not too worried about battery life. And at the very bottom, whisper mode makes your laptop run quieter by managing your CPU, GPU system temperatures and fan speeds for the best possible performance. If you'd like to use this, you can choose it and enable it here, then set a fan volume target for 40 FPS. For example, on the quieter side or more balanced. I'm not entirely too sure what this does, and as it'll be messing around with things behind the scenes, if you're not too worried about noise, just leave it off and continue. Seeing that we mentioned the Nvidia control panel, let's quickly look at that. Right-click your desktop, choose Show More Options, and then Nvidia Control Panel. Inside of here, we'll start on Adjust Image Settings with Preview. Choose Use My Preference over here and drag it to the Performance side. Then click Apply and choose Use the Advanced 3D Image Settings. Then Apply once more and then click Take Me There. This will take you down to the Manage 3D Settings tab. Here we can adjust settings globally for all of our different games and of course on a program-to-program basis. As I've already done an Nvidia optimization guide, which you'll find linked down below, I'll just really quickly run through this. I'll leave pretty much everything as default. As you can see here, the low latency mode we've already covered, power management mode I've set to prefer maximum performance, and at the very bottom, everything here seems pretty good. Vertical sync is turned off, which is a good thing. Besides this, we'll leave everything as is. On the surround and physics tab, it doesn't really matter nowadays what you choose, but you can choose your GPU here to give physics better performance. Doesn't really matter in most cases nowadays anyways. Auto select is fine. Finally, on the adjust video and image settings tab, you can enable things like RTX video enhancement, which I wouldn't really recommend as it makes videos look a little bit weird. If this is something you'd like, you can turn it on and improve YouTube videos, streams, etc. For me though, I'll be leaving this off as the improvement just isn't worth it for me. You can also adjust things like your color and stuff like that here usually, but on this PC it seems to be locked off. I assume this is because Windows manages most of these settings nowadays. Also, this is a laptop GPU, so a ton of settings are missing here on the side. Again, you'll find a Nvidia guide in the description down below that has all of the remaining tabs and most of the extra features that aren't actually listed here. Now that we're done with our graphics card, let's continue. I've already covered uninstalling bloatware at the beginning of this video. Essentially, it was uninstalling the default bloatware that's installed by your hardware vendor that comes with your system when it's pre-installed. If you installed it yourself, all of that should be missing. That's fantastic, but there's still a lot left on Windows that we can remove. Starting with user-added programs. These are things that you might have installed or someone else. Simply hit Start, type in Control Panel, and open it. Then, in the Programs Uninstall a Program section, we'll be going through this list here and uninstalling anything you don't necessarily need. As I got a new laptop, I installed Geekbench and Cinebench and all of that good stuff just to run tests on it, but when I'm done testing, these I should come back and uninstall. Everything else here seems pretty much fine. I use AnyDesk, a browser, this is the control software from my laptop, and most of the other things here are just drivers and things like that. So mine is already debloated as much as possible on my particular system. Yours will obviously look different based on what you use your system for. Now let's get to the actual good stuff. Also, just to make things better, I'll go to Settings, followed by Personalization, and under the Colors section, I'll be enabling dark mode here. Okay, so removing bloatware that comes pre-installed with Windows. There's a couple of different ways of doing this, and one of my favorite ways nowadays is using a PowerShell script that simplifies everything. The CTT Tool, or Chris Titus Tech tool, is now WinUtil, and essentially, on the GitHub page, scrolling down, you'll see a picture of what it is here. You've likely seen this before in other guides. I'll scroll all the way down to this section over here where we find Stable Branch. Copy this. You'll find this link in the description down below. You can also optionally type it into PowerShell in just a moment. Hit Start, type in Terminal on Windows 11, otherwise PowerShell, if you don't see Terminal installed. Then run this as admin. Once it opens up, we'll be pasting it in here with Control-V or sometimes Control-Shift-V, and we'll hit Enter. Essentially, this connects to christitus.com/win and runs it. When you do so, you'll see this pop up and this GUI over here, which simplifies things quite a bit. This first tab over here, Install, helps you set up your system on new installations of Windows. For example, you can download different browsers, you can download communication software like Discord, TeamSpeak, etc., stuff for development, different game launchers like Steam, GOG, EA, etc., Microsoft tools such as .NET runtimes, multimedia tools, utilities, and much more. This is a fantastic place to get a quick start, and there are a bunch of different ways of doing this. This is just a good enough way. If you're like me and just getting started on your system, you may want to go through this list and tick things that you want to install. Obviously, keep in mind, the less you have installed, and especially the less you have running at the time of playing games, the better your performance should be. So only install what you're actually going to use. Microsoft tools, I'd recommend downloading Autoruns, which we'll be using later. Then for the .NET runtimes, you can skip these as most of the time software installs it, except for at the very top, make sure to tick Visual C++ 2015 to 2022 64-bit. Doing so will make sure that your compatibility with most games that could possibly have DLL errors is going to be fixed. This is a great choice, and if you especially have had those errors before with certain games, you should definitely tick this, and sometimes a 32-bit version as well. For me though, 64 is fine. Besides that, we've run through everything, and we can choose Install or Upgrade selected to download and install everything that we have ticked here. Open up the console window, which is running in the background, just to monitor things as they go, to know exactly how far it is, as this window over here doesn't seem to show anything happening as it's doing this, and it could take a very long time, depending on your internet speed, drive speed, and of course, how many things you chose to install. So this is going to take a hot minute. Alright, so there we go. We've now installed everything, and whatever was skipped, I installed manually. Some of the things didn't install, that's fine, but here's the thing, right? We're optimizing Windows and trying to get it working as fast as possible. Why did I just install a bunch of stuff? Well, these are programs that I'll be using. Optimizing Windows, of course, means getting the best performance from games, but it shouldn't come at a cost of productivity and, of course, your general usage. While you could uninstall absolutely everything to try and get the best performance in a game, it's not always required, and actually it's kind of overkill. As long as something isn't running while you're playing a game, it should have zero impact on your FPS, performance, etc. The only things that I just installed that could be messing with the game would be Spotify if I'm listening to music at the same time as playing games, a browser if I'm watching YouTube, etc., Discord, especially if I'm screen sharing or have the overlay enabled, etc. But the rest of the programs that aren't running don't do anything to your performance. Just keep in mind that programs may be closed, but they could have services running in the background. Most of what I've installed here doesn't have anything running in the background most of the time, and we can easily check by right-clicking our taskbar, going to Task Manager or hitting Ctrl-Shift-Escape to get here, everything in here in the Processes tab is currently running on your system. A lot of these programs here are things that I just installed. For example, all of these PowerToys apps and Discord, everything, AnyDesk, etc. All of these that are currently running will affect your game, even if it's 0.1 FPS. Closing everything that you can is a good idea. A lot of the time in these programs, such as PowerToys for example, we can choose what we want running on our system. For example, most of the stuff I don't use, so I'll be turning it off. Turning off everything that I don't use. Now, all of a sudden, there's less running. This is great. When we're playing games, and especially restart our PC and then play games, even less should be running. However, when you start up your PC, there are other programs that start up with it, especially if you've just installed them, for example. Steam, Discord, Spotify, everything should open up automatically when we boot our PC, and obviously we don't need everything to start when we boot our PC. Head across to the Startup tab, which is this little speedometer on Windows 11. It could look different on Windows 10 or just be a Startup tab at the top. Anyways, in here, sort by status in order to see what's enabled, as in will start with your PC, and what's disabled, as in won't start with your PC. Obviously, I don't need Discord opening. I can open that manually. I'll right-click and choose Disable. The same goes for Steam, Spotify. I do want ShareX running. Windows Antivirus, I'll leave running. OneDrive I don't necessarily need, but I'll leave it on, as I do use OneDrive. My password manager doesn't need to start with Windows. Discord, again, doesn't need to start with Windows, and AnyDesk as well. Unless I'm going to start it up and remotely connect to this PC in the future, it doesn't need to run all the time. Now, when we reboot our system, even less should be running, and in the top right, you should see the startup time over here should take a little bit less. That's good. This means better performance in games now. However, there are some things called services that run in the background. A lot of these you can manually disable or set to manually start with no impact on the programs that you're messing around with, but sometimes by playing with what services start up with your system, etc., you could mess with programs and how they work in the background. I wouldn't recommend this next step unless you know what you're doing or know how to undo things if you mess something up. Click the Puzzle tab over here, which is the Services section, click the three dots and choose Open Services. Otherwise, you can hit Start, type in Services, and open it from here. This window over here should tell us everything that runs in the background, completely hidden from Task Manager, except for on some of the tabs, and it tells us exactly what it is, if it's currently running as a service, and how it automatically starts up. AnyDesk starts up automatically whenever we start our PC, and it is currently running. Do I need this running all the time? No. I'll right-click this, choose Properties, then we'll change it to Startup Type Manual from Automatic. When we click Apply and OK, the next time we restart our PC, AnyDesk won't start up automatically. When we open AnyDesk, it may say, hey, the service needs to run. You can click Yes, and bam, there you go, it works as usual. You can do the same for everything else on this list that you understand what it is. And you can even right-click and stop them if you don't need them running at the time of changing things. Just keep in mind if something breaks, come back to here and re-enable it to automatic or right-click it, choose Start, and see if that fixes your issue. This is a more advanced thing, but it can help quite a bit, especially with needy services running in the background, eating up a ton of your performance. Everything else here is probably fine, and I'll go through it at a later stage, but a lot of the things like Game Bar and stuff like that we'll be managing with a different tool in just a moment. This is mostly for managing things that you understand what they are, and it does require quite a bit of technical know-how, as there's just so much listed here by default. For now, I'll close out of this, and we're basically done with Task Manager over here. The only thing you may want to do on a new system is in the Performance section, on the CPU tab, I like to right-click, change Graph to, and Logical Processors just to see the performance of each CPU processor and hyper-threaded processor as I'm playing games and things like that to see if something weird is happening. This is also a great tab to monitor RAM usage, GPU usage, etc. The less that you have running on your system, the more free RAM you should have available. If you have a ton of RAM on your system, more RAM is going to be used, as it's just going to speed up things in the background. A lot of stuff, such as in this section over here, is cached in the background and picked up whenever it's needed. So don't worry too much about high RAM usage unless you're running 8 gigs or 6 gigs and you really need to squeeze the most out of your system. For most games, however, with 12 and above gigs of RAM, you don't really need to worry about it too much if games are going to be using only 4 or 3. Anyways, we're done with Task Manager, let's close it. Heading back to our CTT tool, which we had open earlier, if you closed it, just rerun that one line and it'll open back up. We'll now head across to the Tweaks tab at the very top. Here, you can do things like enabling the dark mode, which is a good idea. Everything else here I usually leave as is, except for show file extensions. It's a good idea to turn this on, but you can also do it by opening a file browser, hitting Start and E, then heading across to View at the very top, followed by Show, and making sure File Name Extensions is ticked, and Hidden Items as well. Everything else here seems pretty good. Mouse acceleration I'd recommend turning off, and of course you can do this by hitting Start, typing in Mouse, opening up Mouse Settings, then from the new Bad Settings window, click Additional Mouse Settings to get to the good old settings window, like this. On the Pointer Options tab, you can disable Enhance Pointer Precision, apply, and this disables mouse acceleration. It's a good idea to do this, especially if windowed games are being affected, for example, or games that don't support raw direct mouse input. Everything else here is your preference, such as wheel speed, button clicking speed, etc. Doesn't really matter all that much. Everything else here I'm pretty good with leaving as is, and at the very bottom you can see Add and Activate the Ultimate Power Performance Plan. This is a good idea unless, as I mentioned previously, you've got a different piece of software or a specific power plan that's installed in your system that's optimized for your particular setup. You can see if you have one by hitting Start, typing in Power, and opening up Edit Power Plan. Head back to Power Options at the very top, and if you see something like Balanced with no high performance or anything like that, it's a good idea to, in here, click the Add and Activate Ultimate Performance, which should add a new option here. I'll refresh and it should show. At this point it should be showing up. For some reason it doesn't seem to be, even though it says it's added it. We can also manually add it by finding the command on a website, copying it and pasting it into an admin PowerShell or terminal window. As such, now it should show up in our power plan options, and yeah, it should be showing here, but it's not. I assume this app that I mentioned previously is messing around with it, so I'm not getting the option here. Anyways, selecting the Ultimate Performance Plan or High Performance should give you better performance across the board. I'm pretty sure that this app does adjust it for me, so for now I'll just ignore this and step over it, as it doesn't seem to be working the way that I exactly expect. Anyways, the last thing we want to click here is at the very bottom, Run O&O Shutup. This is a fantastic tool for deep-loading Windows. Clicking it will download and open up O&O Shutup 10 Plus, which you can download for free from the internet as well if you don't want to use this tool to get it. It's just a fantastic, easy way to get it, so that's what I've done. Starting on the Current User tab, we'll click Actions, followed by Apply Recommended, and you get a pop-up about a System Restore Point. If it says System Restore Points are deactivated, it's a good idea to turn them on. So, System Settings, System Protection, Configure, C Drive, and enable it. I'll choose Open Control Panel, and inside of this System Protection window, for C Drive, I'll configure and turn this on. Then we'll select maybe somewhere around 50 or so gigs of space on our C drive in order to keep old settings and things like that, just to make sure we don't lose anything in our system or happen to land up in a broken state. This is a good thing to leave on, even if it does eat up a handful of your drive space. 50 gigs or even less is good. I'll click OK, and now, when we click it again, Actions followed by Recommended, we get this pop-up. I'll choose Yes, and this creates a System Restore Point, which means that if something were to go wrong now when I reboot my system, I can just roll back and we'll be good to go once more. Fantastic. There we go. The restore point was made and our changes were now set. So, what did this do? Well, it turned off telemetry and spying and things like that, and we can scroll down this list and manually customize things as you see fit. This disables things like Windows Copilot. I think it may also do something with the Windows AI, or maybe not yet, but it's a good tool to run anyways. On the Local Machine tab, once again, Actions and Apply, followed by OK. And there we go. You can scroll through this list and disable what you want, but some of these things, especially those listed as limited or no, affect certain programs and can negatively impact how games perform, how you use your PC, etc. So only tick things that you know won't have an effect on you in a negative way. Anyways, for me, this is fine. I can close it and we're done with this. Now we've successfully turned off telemetry and other things like that, which is good. In the same screen over here, we have a couple of essential tweaks here. For example, we can turn off consumer features, telemetry, etc. If we hover over any of these, it'll give you a little pop-up saying what exactly it is. So, consumer features, this won't automatically install games, third-party apps, or application links from the Windows Store, but some apps will be inaccessible like Phone Link. As I will be using Phone Link, I'll leave this unticked, but you can tick it if you wish. Telemetry, this will lock many Edge browser settings, but it'll help disable telemetry on Windows, so it's a relatively good idea to tick, especially as I don't use Edge at all. Activity history, we can turn this off if you want, which is also a pretty good privacy idea. Then game DVR. This is the dependency for some store games. For the most part, you don't really need this, but if you're going to be playing a lot of Xbox Game Pass apps, then it may be a good idea to leave this enabled, so don't tick it. Hibernation is your preference. On laptops, it'll save a ton of battery power, so I wouldn't recommend ticking it here, but on desktop PCs, for example, if you tick it, it could clear up 50 or so gigs of drive space, as there's a file on your C drive that contains retains all of your RAM from when you last put your PC in hibernate, so you can easily load it back up and have used pretty much no power while it was hibernating. Home Group is a password-protected home network sharing service. I don't use this, so I'll tick it. Location tracking, it's good to turn off. Storage Sense deletes temporary files automatically. Ticking this will stop that, so it's not a good idea to tick in most cases. Teredo is an IPv6 feature that can cause additional latency. I'll be ticking this. Wi-Fi Sense is a spying service that phones home, so I'll be ticking this. And then we have a couple of other options like enable end task by right-clicking it in the taskbar, which is a relatively good thing. A lot of apps have close window, but we can also add an end task option. We can run disk cleanup, which is a good idea. We'll be doing that anyways. We can replace PowerShell 5 with 7. Don't really need to worry about this unless you use PowerShell often. Set hibernation as default is a good thing, especially if you're using a laptop, so I will be ticking this. And services to manual. This turns a bunch of system services to manual that don't need to be running all the time. This is pretty harmless, as if the service is needed, it'll simply start. I did mention services earlier, and this has a whole bunch of preset services that it'll turn off that Windows has by default. I will be taking this to close more things in the background, allowing us more performance to be spent on games. Then at the very bottom, we have a couple of different options, which may be useful to you, but be careful about ticking anything here. Debloat Adobe, which is a good idea if you're using anything Adobe, such as Premiere, Photoshop, Acrobat, etc. We can disable Microsoft Copilot, which will disable AI built in to Windows, which is a pretty good idea unless you're going to be using it. Intel MMV Pro, as far as I understand, you can turn this off, as it's a security risk in some cases and only really used on enterprise systems, but do give it a Google in case you may be using anything that could be using this. Notification tray, I do use the calendar, so I'll leave this on. Set display for performance, you don't really need to do this, but you can do this manually, which I'll show you later on anyways. Classic right-click menu is a fantastic thing if you don't like this horrible round mess. I will be ticking this. Set time to UTC for dual booting, which is a good idea, especially if you're going to be dual booting with Linux. And at the very bottom, remove all MS Store apps, which is not a good one to tick. Remove Microsoft Edge. Once again, some programs rely on this, so it's not a good idea to tick. And finally, remove OneDrive. If you don't use OneDrive at all, tick this. But if you're ever going to use OneDrive on this system, don't tick this. Now that we're done with all of this, click Run Tweaks and check this window in the background to see when everything completes. We'll just need to wait for this to finish. And there we go. These are now done. So heading back here, across to the Config tab, there's just a couple of housekeeping things here that you can tick if you want, such as enabling Hyper-V, the Windows subsystem for Linux, and the Windows Sandbox if you use those features like I do. You can enable the old legacy media support, such as Direct Play for certain old Xbox games and stuff like that. We can install all .NET Framework, tick it here. I'll be disabling the web suggestions for the search box, which I would recommend for you as well, unless you specifically use that, and everything else I'll leave as is. We'll install features, and as I told it to do a couple of bigger things like Hyper-V, Sandbox, etc., this is going to take some time to do, so once again I'll be looking at the window over here as things progress. And there we go. Finally, we can set up auto login so we can skip the password screen if you want that. Just keep in mind, if you're using a laptop, this is not a good idea, especially if you'll be taking it places. We can reset Windows Update, the network, run an SFC scan, which checks your system for corrupt files, and if you've already been using your system for a long time, I'd recommend clicking this, as it'll just do some general housekeeping to make sure everything is A-OK on Windows. Adobe Creative Cloud, uninstalling, and WinGet are just options that you have if you want them. Most people won't need these two options, however. On the Updates tab, you don't need to worry about anything here really that much. There are a couple of options. We can leave it as out of box, which is just the default Windows Update settings. We can tell Windows to only download security updates, which is a relatively good idea. It'll delay feature updates by 2 years and will install security updates 4 days after release. So when Windows 23 H2 or whatever it is comes out with all of the AI stuff, if you have this option ticked, that'll take 2 years to install on your system, which means that you won't be a beta tester for Microsoft. You won't be finding bugs and other weird issues. Your system will be more stable, or should be more stable, in this configuration. Finally, disabling all updates is not recommended, of course, because security updates are also disabled. Leaving it as this middle option or the far left option are the best. We'll close it, and now we're officially done with the CTT tool, and we've got quite a bit done on our system. We've turned off a lot of spying settings, we've disabled searching the web in something like this, for example, and our system should generally be quite a bit happier. Let's quickly talk about the Autoruns tool, which I mentioned when we were doing that CTT thing. Essentially, Autoruns is a more powerful task manager startup manager that'll show you a lot more that's starting up with your system, such as, for example, if you have Spotify installed and it's not listed in Task Manager, yet it still starts every time you start your system, Autoruns will be able to help you find it and disable it from automatically starting up with your system, for example. So, having a look back at our system, as I did have Autoruns ticked to automatically download, and I don't think it did, we'll need to head across to the Microsoft website, which you'll find linked down below, and we'll download the Autoruns over here. We'll save it and open the zip. Then we'll extract Autoruns 64 to our desktop. That's it, just the one file. We'll open Autoruns 64, click agree, and here we go. These sysinternal tools are from Microsoft themselves, so they are a lot more trustable than a lot of software out there. I'd highly recommend the entire sysinternal suite for many advanced things that you can do in your system. This is just one of them. On the Everything tab over here, which is the default tab, we see what starts up with our system. Everything that's ticked here will boot with our system whenever we log in. For example, Discord. Even though we turned it off in our task manager over here, it may still start up in the background whenever we boot up our system. So you can untick options here, and just like that, they shouldn't start with your system. I don't want Spotify or Steam starting. Everything I can start manually, and you may need to run this program as admin to turn off certain settings. That's fine. So I'll untick everything again. Brave doesn't need to start with my PC nor Microsoft Edge. Discord again. AnyDesk as well. And down here, I think everything's fine for the most part. When you eventually pass a certain point, the rest of these get into services and things like that. So mostly you'll be focusing on this top section over here, which is mostly the logon tab at the very top up here. The Explorer tab customizes what happens when you right-click certain files, and it can get super nerdy. For example, as I installed this file locksmith to tell me what's using certain files that's stopping me from deleting them. If I right-click a shortcut, for example, you should see, well, hey, there's the old context menu and also a unlock with file locksmith. This over here is what we can turn off in here, for example. We can clean up our context menu. The same goes for cleaning up Internet Explorer, cleaning up our scheduled tasks, managing our services. And if we untick something here, it'll disable that service, so this tab's not the best to play around in. Usually you'll want to set something to manually start up, and again, you'll be doing that from the services windows. The same goes from the drivers tab. We can turn off certain drivers if you wish, disable certain codecs, etc., etc. This is a seriously powerful tool, and it gets really nerdy beyond the logon tab up here, so that's mainly where most people will stay. Anyways, I've unticked a couple of things, and now startup should be even more optimized. And of course, the less that runs on our system when we play games, the more FPS and performance we can get. So that's good. Now for just a couple of other Windows tweaks that I'd like to do. You don't necessarily need to follow all of these, but some of them you may find interesting. So first of all, the one thing that really gets me with Windows is this thing over here. I drag something to the side and it tells me what I can pop next to it. I have to select something or click in a blank spot. I really don't like this, as I can manage my own windows. In order to turn this off or adjust the functionality, hit start, type in settings, if you can spell that is, and on the system tab, we'll be selecting multitasking over here. I will leave snap windows on, but we'll expand it and we'll turn off show what I can snap next to it. Now when we drag it to the side of our screen, it doesn't pester me about what I can snap next to it, as I can manage my own windows by myself. Everything else here I leave as is. Then, if you'd like to connect to your PC through other systems on your network and remotely control it, you can use things like AnyDesk, Parsec, Moonlight, and Sunshine, which is what I'm using here now, but you can also use Remote Desktop, which is built into Windows. If you're running Windows 11 Pro or Windows 10 Pro, you can search Remote Desktop, and in Remote Desktop settings, enable this here, which should allow other people on your network to connect to your PC as long as they have your username and password. Some people find this useful, other people don't. It's your choice if you want to use it. Then of course, on the personalization tab, we've already, under the color section, set the system to dark, but you can also set a highlight color, which is really useful if you like customizing your system in that way. In here, you'll also see transparency effects, which we can turn off. And as you can see, my Windows background colors no longer show through on this settings window over here. On some older systems or less powerful systems, turning this option off can help you gain some FPS in game, especially if the game is using transparency for some reason, or you have a settings window open in the background, for example. Obviously, you can just close Windows in the background, but this is your preference. Then on the Apps tab on the far left, we can manage installed apps, which is fine. This menu over here is just a lot slower than using the control panel, for example, so I usually use that. Uninstalling apps that you don't use is always a good choice. On the Apps for Websites tab, for example, I make sure to turn off pretty much everything here, so whenever I click a link on a website or whatever, it's not going to open up different apps on my system like Maps or Microsoft To Do. Video playback, you can customize things in here, such as enhancing the video, And of course, if you're using something like the Nvidia App or GeForce Experience, that's already being done for you. This is the Windows version of that. You can also optimize for battery life or optimize for quality based on how you're going to be using your system most of the time. If you're going to be using it on battery most of the time, leave it as battery. Otherwise, if you're running a system that's plugged in most of the time, choose optimize for video quality. Also, speaking of things that Nvidia and other apps have an alternative for, we also have HDR. Windows has a built-in auto HDR, which is okay, and of course can help upscale some standard definition games to HDR. If you have an HDR display, you can consider enabling auto HDR, which can help improve how things look on your system, but just keep in mind it will use a little bit more battery. So if you choose optimize for battery life, I don't really use HDR, so this doesn't matter too much for me. And of course, this mostly has to do with the videos, but it does have effect on games and apps as well. Heading back, there's also a startup tab, but we've already covered this through two different means. Also, speaking of gaming, we'll head across to the gaming tab on the far left and the game bar tab. And if you don't use the game bar, which is Start and G, you should turn this off. That's it. It's that simple. Then captures. If you don't use the Xbox game bar to capture gameplay, turn this off as well. Obviously, I turned this off using that CTT tool, but it's a good idea to make sure it's off here as well. And of course, this could be recording in the background, slowing down your gameplay, etc., especially if you're recording the gameplay in other apps, Shadowplay, OBS, etc. Finally, game mode is a good thing to have turned on, so turn this on and leave it on if it's not already on. This should improve how games perform on Windows, and it's actually improved quite a bit in the past few years. Previously, I mentioned to turn this off, but for now, it's a good idea to have it on. Then on the privacy and security tab, a lot of these options have already been turned off by that O&O Shutup application that we used, but you can manage other ones from here as well. For the most part, nothing too crazy is here, except for maybe diagnostics and feedback. You can turn off sending optional data, but just keep in mind you do need this turned on if you're going to be using the Windows Insider builds of Windows. Most of the time, you won't be worrying about that, so having it off is fine. And of course, O&O turned it off once more. Scrolling down, app permissions, especially important if you have a brand new system install. On the microphone tab, make sure that microphone access is turned on. This allows different apps to use your microphone. You can manually disallow certain programs such as photos from using your microphone and settings and snipping tool and stuff like that. But if you have this turned off, things like Discord, OBS and things like that can actually be affected. Scroll down to the bottom and make sure that let desktop apps access your microphone is turned on. Otherwise, things like Discord, in-game voice chat, etc. won't work properly. So on my system, I'll be using these options here. Seems good. The same goes for the camera tab as well. Based on what you want accessing the camera, only really a camera app is what I'll be using, and things like OBS, for example, Skype, etc. So desktop apps must also be ticked, as well as it generally being turned on. You can run through the rest of these options as they're all pretty much self-explanatory. It is going to take some time, but it is worth doing it, especially if you care about your privacy and security. Now adjusting Windows for extra performance. In that CTT tool, it did talk about enabling the performance mode on Windows for dragging things around, etc. Usually you don't need to worry too much about it, as it doesn't have too much of an effect, especially if you're playing games in full screen mode without many programs open in the background. But if you want to, here's how you play around with it. Hit Start, type in Performance, and open Adjust the Appearance and Performance of Windows. In this window that pops up over here, I'd recommend just leaving it as Let Windows Choose, but you can choose to adjust for Best Performance and Apply, which means that whenever you drag things around, it's no longer animated. Clear type text is turned off, so it may be more difficult to read. And if you choose to run your system in extreme performance mode like this, I'd recommend choosing Custom and at least having smooth edges for screen fonts enabled, as this is going to make things a lot more readable. Then enabling peak is also a good idea. Otherwise, when you hover over programs, it's not going to show them. You can enable this, apply, and now when you hover over programs, it will show them. Anyways, besides those two, you don't really need to worry about this too much. I would recommend leaving it as Let Windows Decide, as that's just going to keep things looking as good as possible, and it's not really going to affect your performance all that much. However, in that same window, so Start, Performance, this window, we should head across to the Advanced tab and have a look here. The virtual memory is your page file. A lot of people say to turn this off to save disk space, but it's actually kind of important for things to run properly. I would recommend automatically managing page file to be turned on, apply, OK, etc., just so things can run happily in the background. Essentially, the page file is an overflow for your RAM. So if you run out of RAM in your system, things aren't just going to lock up and crash. This does reserve a little bit of drive space, and you can turn it off to save that back, but it is important to have on in most cases. If it's using too much space on a small hard drive, you can turn off automatic paging, choose custom size, and type something in here. However, in most cases, leaving this as system managed is a good idea. If it's enabled for all of your drives, you can go through your other installed drives and set it to no paging file. Just make sure that your C drive does have a paging file as system managed for the best performance. Click OK, and assuming you've adjusted some settings, it may save you some extra drive space on your other drives, for example. Now, cleaning up Windows. Previously mentioned, again, was the cleanup tool. I'd recommend running this once every week or so. It's a good thing to run whenever you think about it. Hit start, type in cleanup, and open the disk cleanup application. Run this as admin. This is especially useful after installing updates, etc., as a ton of files are left lying around. In here, I usually tick absolutely everything, as I don't really need any of these old cached files, except for 2 particular options, sometimes 3. Recycle bin, don't tick this, otherwise when you open your recycle bin, everything is gone. This will clear your recycle bin. Temporary files you should tick, thumbnails you should disable. Most of the time, unless it's taking a ton of space, thumbnails aren't loading or refreshing properly, or you're having some other kind of issues, as having cached thumbnails usually makes Windows a little bit snappier. I'll leave everything as is. As you can see, the only 2 options were recycle bin and thumbnails. I'll click OK, and bam! Now it'll automatically save a couple of megs to possibly a couple of gigs, especially if you've recently updated Windows. Running this as admin allows it to clean up things like the update cache and temporary files that are lying around from that, for example. There are a couple of places that this tool doesn't clean up, so hold start and press R to bring up this run dialog. Inside of here, type %local app data %/temp. Hit enter, and this opens up your local app data temporary folder. Control A to select everything, and Shift Delete to permanently delete everything. Hit yes, continue, and you will get some errors, such as things being in use. Just click do this for all and skip. Now you should have saved yourself probably a couple of megs to a couple of gigs of drive space. There's a couple more temporary folders, such as this PC, C followed by temp. This one is also safe to clear. Select everything and Shift Delete as well. There may be a couple of other folders in a few other places, but for now, it's fine to leave them. Now let's quickly optimize your audio settings. This is especially important if you have things like monitors that can support audio. There could be extra input and output devices that are just clouding up your system. Right-click your sound icon and choose Open Sound Settings or something like that. If you see this window instead of the Windows 10 square good window, scroll down and click More Sound Settings. This will open up this window, which is what we want. Inside of here, right-click and choose Show Disabled Devices and Show Disconnected. Everything that's not plugged in is currently disabled. You can right-click something and choose Disable to permanently turn it off. You can enable it later on. This will stop your monitor, for example, playing audio if you plug it in, and all of a sudden your video is playing through your monitor. If you disable it here, that won't happen in the future. The same is said for the recording tab here. External microphones you can disable or enable. You can disable your laptop's built-in microphones, so you don't need to worry about that being selected automatically, and you can even enable stereo mix. This, if you enable it, allows all of the sound in your system to come back in through this microphone port here, and you can broadcast whatever you're listening to or hearing as a normal microphone input in different programs. This used to be super powerful, and nowadays it's relatively powerful, but it seems to only really be limited to Realtek audio chipsets, so not everyone has this option. I'll disable this for now as I don't really use it. Find your audio output device, right-click, choose Properties, and you can customize things in here, like on the Advanced tab, you can change the audio quality. Usually higher is better, but beyond 48 to 96,000, it doesn't really matter all that much. 48 is usually the highest you should go on most setups, but you can crank it up if you really need. Just keep in mind, the higher the hertz doesn't mean the better the sound, it just means that higher pitched sounds can come through, but just keep in mind, human hearing kind of tops out at a point at roughly 20,000 hertz, so 48,000 is already double that. Unless you're a super nerd, just leave it at 48K and that's fine. You can customize this if you wish. The spatial sound tab, things do get kind of important. If you enable this, it may change how games sound, and oftentimes in a negative way. Playing Counter-Strike, Valorant, and other competitive shooters and things like that, you should have this turned off, as the games should manage the audio in the way that they want, making sure that things sound the way the developers intended, which is usually a competitive advantage. Sometimes you'll also have different effects here, which don't seem to be present here on this. Maybe on this they will be, not really. only, but you sometimes have enhancing and things like that. You can turn them off, which may give you better performance in certain cases, but oftentimes it doesn't really matter. On the Recordings tab, I've right-clicked and chosen Properties for my microphone. It's usually a good idea to turn off Allow Applications to take exclusive control, so if you open up something that can take exclusive control, it's not going to make your microphone disappear from Discord, it's not going to stop your game hearing you, etc. It's a good idea to tick just across the board unless you specifically need this, such as being a musician, for example. Check the quality. Once again, I'll be choosing 2-channel 24-bit 4800. The bitrate does actually make a difference. If you have 24-bit or even 32, it's a good idea to choose that, as it should be better than 16 or worse. So 24-bit is better for the microphone. Obviously, it's not going to make too much of a difference with a built-in laptop microphone, but the option is there, so I'm going to choose it. The same goes for using an external mic. It's good to set that option here as well. Communications is where we want to change something. Change this to do nothing and apply. Now, whenever you go into Discord, for example, or Skype, it's not going to turn down your game, Spotify, etc. This is a good thing to set to do nothing. Unparking your CPUs. Essentially, a parked core is a CPU core that's not going to be used in most cases, so it's just been parked to save energy. If you want better performance, it's a good idea to unpark all of your cores. There's a pretty cool program to do this. Simply open up your browser and search for Quick CPU. Otherwise, you'll find a link down below. On the CoderBag website, scroll down and choose from the very bottom of the page the download 64 here. Save it and open it, and then you can open up the MSI inside of it. You don't need to extract it first. Close the zip. Next, continue the installation, and once it's done, you can delete that zip file. We'll leave it as launch, finish, yes, and when it eventually starts up, you'll see a bunch of stuff. In here, all you need to do is just look at the far bottom left over here and drag all of these to the very top, so 100%, including the performance option over here, apply, and there you go. You've now unparked your CPU cores. You can also click this button up here to get maximum performance on your PC. We can click accept, and this will create a new power plan on your system that you can choose in the power plan window. Right over here, quick CPU scheme. If you choose this, which is surprising that it added here, my ultimate power plan didn't come here. They should do similar things. I'm pretty sure they're almost exactly the same. This one may be a little bit different for you. Just play around with things and see what you get better performance with. Anyways, we're done with this program. You can close it, and if you want, you can uninstall it. Next up, something seriously snake oily: timer resolution. Essentially, your system has a timer. You can increase the accuracy of it by pinging it every couple of milliseconds or something to make it more consistent. This should hypothetically improve frame times, input latency, and a couple of other things in different games, applications, etc. You'll see this coming up a lot in competitive Valorant, Fortnite, etc. Ultimately, it's your preference to actually use this or not. I'll show you how to do it here. I kind of think it's snake oil, but if you want to try it, you can try it. Just keep in mind that Windows did change the way that the timer works, so you'll need to do a simple registry change in order for the program to work properly. If you've been using this timer resolution program already and you're on an updated Windows 11 system, for example, it hasn't been working the way you think it has. We need to do a registry change to re-enable it. Hit start, type in regedic, and open the registry editor. Click yes. Then on the far left, expand HKey local machine, system, current control set, control, and scroll all the way down to Session Manager. Expand this, then choose Kernel over here. Then right-click, choose New, and dword 32-bit value, and type in exactly global, capital G, timer, capital T, resolution, capital R, requests, as such, capital R once more. You'll find this down below. Hopefully I remember to put it there. Hit enter, enter again, type in 1, and hit enter. Now we've re-enabled the functionality of it. Now we can download the Timer Resolution app. You'll find a link down below. Open up timerresolution.com, download the zip, open it, and here's the exe. You'll need to extract this to somewhere where you can open it in the future, as when you're playing competitive games, it's not going to do anything unless it's running and you have it set up. Open up Timer Resolution and choose maximum. That's it. Now your timer should be running at the maximum resolution, and input latency, frame lag, etc. should all be improved. I think it's snake oil, but anyways, leave it open. Congratulations, you've now done that. There's a couple more things I'd recommend doing just for general housekeeping and improving performance system-wide while you're in game. First of all, disabling overlays you don't need. Discord. Do you really need the overlay from Discord? If you don't use the Discord overlay, such as you have multiple monitors, turn it off. In Discord, head across to User Settings in the bottom left, then head across to Game Overlay by scrolling down and turn off Enable In-Game Overlay. Congratulations, you've now probably saved yourself a couple of FPS in-game and definitely improved your input latency. The same should be said for any other kind of overlay. Even performance overlays such as RTSS, MSI Afterburner and things like that should actually affect your performance in a actually impactful way, even though it's very, very small. Anything that draws over your game window is going to slow it down. Anything that runs in the background is going to slow it down. If you don't need something while you're playing games, just close it, turn it off. On the topic of cleaning up your system, defragmenting and optimizing, hit start, type in defrag, and open defragment and optimize drives. Simply click optimize. That's it. If you have an SSD, it'll be trimmed. If you have a hard drive, it'll take a lot longer. It'll defragment, which is essentially sorting out system files. When you install something on a hard drive, it goes block by block by block. This is cool and all until you delete one of the blocks. Then a big file gets split up into two sections. One here, the rest somewhere else. And the same goes on and on. The more that you delete files and replace files, there's smaller and smaller file chunks just left all over your hard drive. And as there's a physical head that moves backwards and forwards on your hard drive, it actually takes time for it to move from here to here. When you defragment your drive, all of those things are moved into one solid chunk. Defragmenting is a good idea, and you should do this relatively often. Windows does this often by default, and as you can see, it's done weekly. You can change it here to do it more often. It really doesn't matter. Once a week is probably good enough. Restarting your system. It sounds crazy. I, for one, put my PC to sleep every night. When it runs for a week solid, things are slower. Restart your PC. Hit start, power, and choose restart. That's it. If you choose shut down, sometimes it'll be put into a low power state like hibernating, and it won't properly restart, restarting everything in it. Choose restart for the best, most true restart. Task Manager, Apps, you can see that there are 207 processes running. Just remember, we turned off a lot of things. Things are still running. Let's reboot our system and see what's happening then. So, signing in, there are now, just keep in mind my browser was open and stuff like that, 118 processes running. This has halved it, which means there's much less running in the background. We're no longer using 8 gigs. Just by default, we're using 5 gigs of RAM. And if we open up our browser, this only goes up, 300 megs and 10 processes. Not bad. And of course, just making sure that Windows is happy. Running SFC scannow and things like that is a good idea. That CTT tool that we ran at the start did that. It verified our Windows files if you chose to click that button. Otherwise, hit start, open up terminal or CMD as admin. So right click, run as admin. Yes. And in here, type in sfc/scannow as such. Hit enter and it'll run through all of your Windows files. If something is corrupt, it'll fix it. If your system is pending a reboot, reboot first and then run the command. Now, finally, the absolute last thing that I'll be showing you here is a way to clean up different things that are left around your system, such as leftover files and different temporary things. Previously, I recommended using CCleaner. It's not the best tool to be recommending nowadays. You should be using a tool called BleachBit. You'll find it linked down below. Simply download BleachBit. Windows, the portable version, is the best one to download as it's not going to install. It's one less thing to have installed. Save it and open up the zip, and inside of it, you'll find a folder. If you chose to not install this, drag this to your desktop or your downloads or something like that, as this contains the entire program. When you delete this folder, BleachBit is no longer installed. Close the zip, open the folder, and scroll down until you find bleachbit.exe. Right-click, run as admin. If you see something like this pop up, you're missing Visual C++ runtime. Don't download missing DLLs. This should go without saying. Don't download them from different websites. Even if they do work, they could easily be viruses. A DLL is the same as an exe. You can get viruses this way. MSVCR 100 is the C++ redistributable. This should have been installed by CTT, I think. Anyways, the VC Redist pack over here installs a whole bunch of different things, all of these ones over here, and it should help issues like this disappear in the future. You'll find a link to this down below. Simply download the latest 64 release, so over here, save it and run it. Choose yes. It'll flash through a couple of different windows, installing things as it goes. If it prompts you to click yes, just click yes or next and continue, and eventually, this was actually pretty quick, all important C++ runtimes should have been installed. Anyways, if you get these errors, you now know how to fix them. There we go. Finish and BleachBit should now run. Run as admin. Run. Yeah, inside of here, we can do pretty much the exact same things that we can do in CCleaner, such as cleaning up things in our browser like the cache, which can save on a couple of gigs, just depends how much you use your browser, such as cached images, thumbnails, etc. It's a good idea to clear your cache. However, I would never recommend clearing your history, passwords, session, etc. Otherwise, you will be logged out of different websites and it's going to be a huge hassle. Only do the cache, if anything at all. Deep scan, you can choose to tick if you want. This will scan your system for thumbs.db files, dsstore files, which is only for Mac. If you have them on Windows, it just means you downloaded a zip or something from a Mac user, and they could be left around your system. These are pointless, tiny files that you can choose to scan for and delete. All of the things here in Deep Scan are going to take some time to complete. The temporary files over here is going to clear things with .temp on them, things like that. It should also clear your temporary folders. It may be a good idea to tick, but again, anything under Deep Scan is going to take some time to go through. Discord, we can clear the cache if you want. Discord's just a Chrome browser. That's all it is. You can choose to tick it if you want. However, this will also clear your favorited GIFs. It may not be something you want to do in that case. Internet Explorer and Edge I don't use, I'll skip over those. System, memory dump, MUI cache, prefetch, recycle bin, temporary files, and update uninstallers are things that you can choose to clear here. However, recycle bin, just keep in mind, if you have this ticked, your recycle bin will be emptied, everything in there will be deleted. Update uninstallers, this will prevent you from uninstalling service packs and certain Windows updates, but it can save you a couple of megs of space. MUI cache, memory dump, and prefetch should all be fine to be cleared anyways. You can clear logs, but this will clear things like your Windows event viewer. If you had any crashes that you want to explore, don't tick this, otherwise you can if you want. It's not going to be anything crazy. Windows Defender, you can choose to clear your quarantine, your temporary files. Maybe a good idea if you've been using Windows for a very long time. Windows Explorer, there's not too much we need to change here, so with all of this ticked, we can clean, or rather preview first to see what will be deleted, see if anything important will be deleted here. For the most part, it just seems like random temporary files from all over our system. Here's the cache from our browser. Nothing too crazy. You're mainly just looking for things that shouldn't be here. So your browser will be in one section, then it'll be the Windows cache, for example, so prefetch, and besides that, yeah, nothing seems too crazy here. Nothing's jumping out. We'll save a solid 1.3 gigs. Keep in mind, I installed Windows a few hours ago. This isn't an old system, so if you're running this on a system that's been running for quite a long time, you can save quite a bit of space. My browser, after visiting 5 websites, is using 250 megs. On the system section, update uninstallers is big, obviously, because Windows has just updated. And once we clear this once, it's not really going to be that huge until a couple of Windows updates down the road. We'll clean it and delete, and there we go. Now we should save a couple of gigs here and there. This tool is very powerful and it can be dangerous if you don't use it correctly, such as clearing your sessions, cookies, etc. in your browser, clearing your history if you don't want to, etc. So just be careful if you choose to use this. If you're a CCleaner user like I used to be, this is a good replacement and I'd recommend using this instead. When you're done, you can choose to delete this or put this somewhere else. That's it. We've now successfully completely optimized our system and we should be getting much better performance. At this point, if you've just installed your system, you can do things like getting back to the old start menu and things like that, which is a good idea if you don't like the new one. And you can do that with multiple different tools. The one that I prefer to use completely for free is Explorer Patcher. You'll find this linked down below. Click the latest release on the far right, scroll down and choose EP Setup here. Save it and open it. Your Windows will freak out for a moment. Things may go gray. Don't worry about it. It should come back in a few seconds. And now we have the Windows 10 start bar at the very bottom, as you can see with the old start button, but it still opens up the Windows 11 start menu. Right-click your taskbar and choose Properties. This should open up our Explorer Patcher here. Taskbar style is currently set to Windows 10. We can change it to Windows 11 and click the Restart button in the bottom left to restart our File Explorer at any time. We can have the Windows 11 taskbar at the bottom, and on the Start Menu tab, we can have the Windows 10 Start menu. So restart, and now when we click Start, we got the old one, which I much prefer, instead of the new one, in place of where it was on Windows 11. If you like the centeredness of it, it can still be centered, and that's cool. Otherwise, you can't just go full Windows 10 and select that anyways. There's tons of customization we can do in here, and even you can adjust the Windows switches, so Alt-tabbing looks different from Windows 11 to Windows 10 to even Windows NT, which is just tabbing between them when you hit Alt-tab. and even the simple window switcher, which looks like this. It's similar but different. You can customize it at least. I like Windows 11, I'll leave it on that. Weather, we can choose to hide weather from the taskbar or show it if you wish just by toggling it here. You'll see it appear here on the Windows 10 taskbar, but it may look different on Windows 11. On the File Explorer section, we can enable the old file transfer dialog, disable the navigation bar, etc. Really just things that you can customize and play around with. System tray, you can customize this down here, which is great. You can change the sound button from the Windows 10 flyout, which I like, to the Windows 7 flyout, which is even more customizable and looks like this. This is really good and really easy to control. You can change the clock style, etc. So if you like Windows 10, that's great. Or if you like Windows 11, you can even mix and match. It's your preference. It's great. You can play around with this to your heart's content. You can disable hotkeys such as Control-Alt-Shift-Start-L, which opens, well, Microsoft Teams or LinkedIn, I think it was. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of things that you really don't need. You can disable them here. WinF usually opens Windows feedback. You can disable that here. You can even disable rounded corners. So if I run this, if I open up a file browser, this should no longer be rounded. Yeah, it's square. It's Windows 10, but Windows 11. Anyways, you can customize it as you like, all to your preference. And of course, you can even go a step further and use something like Start 11 if you want to customize how your start bar looks even more, your start menu, etc., which I probably will get to at some stage in the future. For now, I've just got some customizing to do to make it work exactly the way that I want it to. Besides that, if you're on a clean install, unpinning some stuff, and of course, heading to the settings window, which you have to use to uninstall Windows apps, followed by apps over here, installed apps, we can uninstall some default things like Cortana if you want, as well as the feedback hub. We can uninstall this or at least disable it. Things like maps we can uninstall or at least disable as well, etc. And the list goes on. 365 Office. Clipchamp I think we can uninstall as well. Shouldn't be too much of a hassle. Edge we do kind of need to keep installed for certain programs. Microsoft To Do, don't need you. Movies and TV, we have VLC for that. News, I don't use that. I have a browser. Outlook, we can install manually. Paint, I'll leave that. People, don't need that. Photos, we'll keep. Quick Assist, I'll uninstall, but if you ever have issues with Microsoft, they usually use this, or at least they did for me. Snipping Tool, I've got a separate program for that, but I'll leave it installed. Solitaire, I don't need. Sound Recorder, I don't need. Weather, I don't need, but I'll leave that as it may be required by Windows for the start bar and stuff like that. And all the way down to the bottom, yeah, that seems good. Hitting Start, things should be a little bit cleaner here, but anyways, we're now done with optimizing my laptop. I can pick it up and play some games in it now, and it should be performing infinitely better than it was before we started this. All of the steps that I showed you in this video will still work for a system that's been running for a long time. It'll work for a desktop. It'll even work for Windows 10, just some Windows 11 things won't work, obviously. Anyways, this has been a fantastic update to the Windows 10 and Windows 11 optimization guides that I did probably a few years ago at this point, or last year, whatever. It's due for an update, and now you have one. If you'd like to see specific Windows 10 and 11 optimization guides that aren't focused around a new laptop or a new installation of Windows, let me know down below, as I'd be happy to make it. It'll probably be quite a bit less rambly than this one, hopefully a lot shorter. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, let me know. My voice is getting super hoarse, and of course it's not 12:30 p.m. It's actually not synced, so it's actually GMT +2, and currently it is 4:35 a.m. Mine has been Troubleshoot. Hopefully you found this video useful. Leave a like, leave a comment. I'll see you all next time. Ciao. And a special thank you to Superior Emerald for being a continued Ultimate supporter.